It is the middle of July. You walk out to the garden with your morning coffee, and the tomato plant that looked perfect on the 4th of July is sagging like it gave up overnight. The bottom leaves are turning yellow. The peppers have stopped setting new fruit. So you do what nearly everybody does, you drag out the garden hose and you water harder. A week later, the plant looks worse. I watch this happen to good gardeners every single summer, and here is the part that stings. The garden that dies in July was almost never killed by July. It was killed by a handful of small habits that felt completely right, and the heat just delivered the bill. Today, I am going to walk you through those mistakes one at a time and show you what I do instead in my own beds. But stay with me to the end because the biggest July problem is not water at all. Your tomatoes quit making new fruit because of one specific thing the heat does inside the flower itself. And once you hear it, you will stop spending money fixing the wrong problem. I'm Steve Calloway. I have been growing food in the same Midwest backyard for more than 20 years, running side-by-side test beds and writing down what actually happened each season. My first garden was a jungle of green that gave me about a dozen tomatoes all summer. My wife Karen keeps the harvest log with me now, and these days our problem is giving food away fast enough. Here is why July is the month that decides everything. From May through the end of June, a garden forgives you. The soil holds moisture, the nights stay cool, and young plants shrug off almost any bad habit. Then sometime around the second week of July, the switch flips. Daytime temperatures park in the 90s, the top of a raised bed dries out faster than at any other point in the year, and every small habit that never mattered before suddenly matters a great deal. Think about what is actually on the line here. A single healthy tomato plant will hand you 20 to 25 pounds of fruit by the end of the season, 20 to 25 pounds from one plant. A plant that collapses in mid-July gives you maybe 5. Spread that across a bed of 6 plants, and you are looking at more than 100 pounds of food gone. Right at the moment the garden should be hitting its stride. I have run July 2 ways in my own test beds, side by side, same varieties, same soil, same weather. The bed managed with the habits I'm about to show you outproduced the other bed by better than double, and neither bed got one drop more water than the other. The difference was never effort. It was knowing what July actually does inside a plant. And keep that flower problem in the back of your mind, the reason fruit stops setting even on a healthy vine, because we are coming back to it at the end. And it is the one mistake you cannot see with your eyes. Now, everything I'm about to walk you through today is one piece of a bigger system. And a few years back, I finally wrote the whole thing down, day by day, in a book called Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. It is the exact 30-day system I follow in my own backyard to roughly double what every plant produces, written out for home gardeners who want significantly more food from the space they already have, with no extra square footage and no expensive equipment. It runs from soil preparation all the way through harvest, and it works in raised beds, in ground plots, and containers alike. Inside is the diagnostic framework I call the Big 7 Yield Killers, which is how I figure out what is holding any garden back, along with feeding for fruit instead of foliage, and the strategic pruning that feels wrong the first time you do it, but multiplies production. It is 115 pages, and it costs $17, marked down from $47. One rescued tomato plant pays for the book all by itself. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. All right, let's get into the mistakes, starting with the one I see in almost every yard on my street. Mistake number 1 is watering a little bit every day. I know it feels like kindness. The garden looks thirsty, so you stand there every evening with the hose and give everything a nice sprinkle. Here is what that sprinkle actually does. A light daily watering only soaks the top 2 inches of soil. So that is exactly where the roots stay, up in the top 2 inches, because roots grow toward water and nowhere else. Now picture that top layer of a raised bed on a 95-degree afternoon in full sun. That shallow band of soil can pass 100 degrees. You have trained the entire root system of your tomato plant to live in the hottest, driest layer of the whole garden. When a heat wave rolls in, those shallow roots cook, and the plant collapses in a matter of days no matter how faithfully you watered. Here is what actually works. Water deeply and water less often. In my beds, that means 2 to 3 times a week, not 7. Each watering should soak the soil 6 to 8 inches down. That is 6 to 8 inches, roughly the length of a dinner knife. Push a finger or a wooden dowel into the bed an hour after watering to check how far the moisture went. When you water deep, the roots follow the water down, and 6 inches under the surface, the soil stays cool and damp even on the worst afternoon of the summer. The plant you watered less often ends up far more drought-proof than the plant you watered every day. I proved this to myself years ago with 2 beds of the same pepper variety. The daily sprinkle bed wilted through every hot week. The deep watering bed sailed through and out-yielded it by half again. Same water in total. Completely different result. That handles how much, but it leaves you with a second question, and that is when. Mistake number 2 is watering in the evening. It feels sensible. The day is cooling off, you're home from whatever the day held, and the water will not evaporate in the sun. The trouble is what wet leaves do overnight. Fungus and blight spores need moisture sitting on a leaf for several hours to take hold. Water at 7 in the evening, and the foliage stays wet until sunrise. That is a 10-hour open invitation. Early blight, the disease that turns tomato leaves yellow with brown target-shaped spots from the bottom of the plant upward, spreads through a July garden almost entirely on this one habit. Here is my rule. Water in the morning, before 9 o'clock if you can manage it. Morning water gives the roots a full tank right before the hottest hours, which is when the plant actually needs it. Any splash on the leaves dries within the hour, and aim the hose low. Water the soil at the base of the plant, not the plant itself. The leaves do not drink, only the roots do. If your knees or your schedule make morning hose duty a chore, a cheap timer and a soaker hose laid along the row will do the morning shift for you for about $20, and it puts every drop at the soil line where it belongs. Get the timing and the aim right, and you will cut your leaf disease problems roughly in half before we even talk about anything else. Now, once the water is going in right, the next job is keeping it there, and this is where I see the most bare dirt and the most lost gardens. Mistake number 3 is leaving the soil bare in July sun. Walk barefoot across a patio at 3 in the afternoon and you already understand this one. Bare garden soil in full summer sun can hit 120 degrees at the surface. 120 degrees. Roots start dying at temperatures well below that. Bare soil also loses moisture to the air at a ferocious rate, which means the deep watering you just learned about evaporates instead of feeding the plant. The fix costs almost nothing. Mulch. Lay down 3 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or dried grass clippings over every bit of open soil in the bed. 3 inches, not a decorative dusting. Keep the mulch pulled back a couple of inches from the plant stems so they can breathe. Under that blanket, the same soil that would have hit 120 stays around 85 degrees. And the moisture that took you 20 minutes to put down sticks around for days instead of hours. In my side-by-side records, the mulch bed needs about half the water of the bare bed and holds steady growth straight through the hottest stretch of the year. 1 bale of straw runs about $8 at the farm store and covers a lot of garden. That is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy for a summer harvest. And remember the promise from the start, the thing the heat does inside the flower itself. Mulch protects the roots, but it cannot protect the blossoms, and we are getting closer to that piece. Mistake number 4 is feeding a plant that is fighting for its life. This one catches the most devoted gardeners because it comes from the best intentions. The plant looks pale and tired, so out comes the fertilizer, and usually the strong blue stuff, because if the plant is struggling, surely it needs groceries. In July heat, that logic backfires twice. First, high nitrogen fertilizer tells the plant to push out fresh leafy growth. Tender new leaves in 100-degree weather need water faster than stressed roots can possibly supply it, so you have ordered the plant to sprint while it is gasping. Second, fertilizer is salt. In hot, fast-drying soil, those salts concentrate around the roots and burn them, which is why a struggling plant so often looks dramatically worse a few days after a heavy feeding. I learned this the embarrassing way. My very first garden was an overfed jungle, 6 feet of gorgeous green leaves and about a dozen tomatoes all season because I kept feeding growth instead of fruit. So here is what actually works. When a heat wave is on, hold the fertilizer entirely. Let the plant hunker down. That pale, slow, sulking look during extreme heat is survival mode, not starvation. Once the forecast breaks and night temperatures settle back down, feed lightly at half strength and choose a fertilizer where the first number on the bag is the smallest, because that first number is nitrogen and July is not nitrogen season. The plant will tell you it worked. New blossoms show up within about a week of a properly timed feeding. Which brings up a fair question. If a sulking plant is normal, how do you tell normal stress from real trouble? Mistake number 5 is reading the wilt at the wrong hour of the day. Almost every gardener judges the garden in the late afternoon because that is when we wander out after the day cools. And at 3 or 4 in the afternoon on a 95-degree day, nearly every squash, cucumber, and tomato plant in America looks half dead. Leaves drooped, whole plant slumped. That afternoon wilt is not an emergency. It is a defense. The plant deliberately lets its leaves go slack to shrink the surface facing the sun, the same way you would pull your hand back from a hot stove. Those plants have plenty of water at the roots, but the gardener sees the droop, panics, and floods the bed at the hottest hour, day after day. Now the soil stays permanently soggy and warm. The air pockets in it disappear, and the roots begin to drown and rot. The plant wilts even harder. The gardener waters even more, and the spiral only ends one way. So here is the habit that fixes it. Judge your garden at 7 in the morning, never at 3 in the afternoon. Say it with me, 7 in the morning. A plant that is still wilted at sunrise after a cool night with no sun on it is telling you something real, either genuinely dry soil, drowned roots, or trouble at the stem. A plant that droops at 3 and stands back up by evening is just getting through a Midwest summer the same way the rest of us do. That one change of clock has saved more of my plants than any product I have ever bought. Now, while you're out there at 7 in the morning, I want you to flip a few leaves over because July has one more ambush waiting. Mistake number 6 is missing the spider mite explosion. Spider mites are nearly invisible, about the size of a grain of pepper, and they live on the underside of the leaf where nobody looks. In cool weather, they barely matter. In hot, dry weather, a new generation matures every 5 days or so, and a light presence in early July becomes tens of thousands by August. The plant just looks tired and dusty, the leaves go pale and stippled with tiny yellow dots, and most folks blame the heat right up until the fine webbing shows and the plant is past saving. Here is the morning check. Flip a few leaves near the bottom of the plant, look for that faint sandpaper, stippling on top and any dusty grit underneath. If you want proof, hold a sheet of white paper under a leaf and tap the leaf sharply. If tiny specks land on the paper and start crawling, you have mites. Now for the part that surprises people, do not reach for the broad spectrum bug spray. Those sprays wipe out the ladybugs and the predatory mites that eat spider mites, while the spider mites themselves bounce back first, so a week later the outbreak is worse and unopposed. What actually works is plain water, delivered hard. A strong jet from the hose aimed up at the underside of the leaves every other morning for a week knocks the mites off and wrecks their webbing. And mites are terrible climbers. Doing it in the morning also bumps up the humidity around the plant, which mites hate, and your plants, in a dry July, mostly appreciate. Free 5 minutes, and it preserves the good bugs that finish the job for you. There is one more habit left before the payoff I promised, and this last mistake is the one that quietly tells your garden to retire early. Mistake number 7 is slowing down the harvest. It happens innocently. July gets busy, the vacation happens, the counter is already full of zucchini, and fruit starts hanging on the vine a few days too long. Here is what the plant hears when that happens. Every vegetable plant has one biological mission, and it is not feeding you. Its mission is finishing seeds. The moment a plant carries fully ripe fruit with mature seed inside, chemical signals go out that say the job is done, and the plant throttles back on new flowers and new fruit. Leave one overgrown baseball bat of a zucchini on the vine and the whole plant may quit producing for 2 weeks. So the fix is almost pleasant. Pick early and pick often. Walk the garden with a basket every 2 days in July. Every 2 days, no longer. Take zucchini at 6 to 8 inches, beans while they are slim and snap cleanly, cucumbers before they yellow at the blossom end. Tomatoes can come in at first blush, the moment the shoulders show colour, and finish ripening on the kitchen counter with zero loss of flavour, which also puts them out of reach of the birds and the hornworms. Constant picking keeps the plant convinced its work is unfinished, so it keeps flowering, and flowering is the whole ball game. Karen's harvest log makes the case better than I can. The summers we picked every other day out-yielded our every 4 or 5 days summers by roughly a third from the same beds. The plant is a little factory. Keep taking product off the line and the line keeps running. And now the piece I have been promising since the first minute, because there is a July heartbreak that none of those 7 fixes touches. The plant looks strong, deep green, well watered, mulched, covered in yellow blossoms. And one by one, those blossoms dry up and drop to the mulch without ever making a single tomato. No bug, no disease, no wilt. Just falling flowers. Here is what is actually happening inside that flower. A tomato blossom has to pollinate itself, and its pollen is alive, and that pollen is fragile. When daytime temperatures run in the mid-90s, and especially when nights stay above about 75 degrees, tomato pollen goes sterile. It clumps, it will not shed, and it cannot do its job. The flower waits a day or two for pollination that is chemically impossible, then the plant cuts it loose. Peppers do the same thing at almost the same temperatures, so every dollar spent on bloom boosters and miracle sprays during a heat wave is spent fixing a problem that is not there. The plant is fine. The pollen is cooked, and no product on any shelf uncooks it. Here is what actually works. First, patience, backed by everything you learned today. Your job during the wave is simply to keep the plant alive and healthy. Deep morning water, mulch, no fertilizer, steady picking of whatever set earlier. A healthy plant holds its strength, and the very first stretch of days back in the 80s brings a flush of new blossoms that all set at once. That late July, early August flush is where my biggest harvest numbers come from every single year. Second, if your forecast shows a long stretch of upper 90s, throw shade. A piece of 30 to 50% shade cloth from the farm store, draped over stakes on the west side of the bed, knocks the afternoon peak down 5 to 10 degrees right at blossom level. And that is often the whole difference between sterile pollen and set fruit. About $15, reusable for years. And third, on the cooler mornings in between, give each flowering plant a gentle shake at the stake. Tomato pollen sheds with vibration. And a 5-second wiggle on a morning in the 80s sets fruit that still weather would have missed. So when the blossoms drop this month, you will know it is not your watering, not your feeding, and not your soil. It is temperature, it is temporary. And the gardeners who keep their plants healthy through it are the ones buried in tomatoes come August. And that is exactly the kind of thing the whole protocol is built on. Tested, cheap, and written out day by day so you can just follow along. Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol is the system I run in my own beds to roughly double what every plant produces. From soil preparation through harvest, including the Big 7 Yield Killers checklist, and the feeding and pruning approach that turns leafy plants into loaded ones. $17, down from $47, and a July garden that survives instead of dying pays that back in 1 week of picking. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So that is July in one sentence. Water deep in the morning, mulch everything, hold the fertilizer, judge the garden at 7, not 3. Blast the mites, keep picking, and let the heat wave pass without panic. Tell me in the comments what state you were in and which of these 7 mistakes you caught yourself making this summer. I read every single one. Next time, I'm going to show you the August reset, the one hard pruning, and the single cheap feeding that turns a tired midsummer tomato plant into a second harvest bigger than the first. Get out there and get your hands dirty, and I'll see you in the garden.